My thoughts on Swerve running into Hangman in the hallway on his hunt for Mox, and then the big line that everybody's talking about is, as we're doing the giant pull apart, shout out violence is forever, huh? Little Coup and Guarini helping break things up. So as they're getting pulled apart and shouting back and forth at each other, and Hangman says, Swerve says, you burnt my house down, and Hangman says, you deserved it, and then Swerve hits him with the I know. And that's the big line everybody's talking about. And it kind of stopped everybody in their tracks, including Hangman, who didn't know how to process that. And he storms away. Look, I don't know. I'm not saying it wasn't an attention-grabbing line that has people talking. And if that's the goal, it worked. I think it's a little too soon to start hinting at, Swerve and Hangman joining forces, either in an uneasy, whether it's an uneasy way or not. I think it's a little too soon to start, hinting at that direction. In fact, I would be on team, these guys should never get along. Now, I know it's pro wrestling, and that's probably something that's unrealistic. I was always on team, MJF should never win the world title in his entire career. He should never be world champion. I've talked about that many times, and how that would have been an extremely effective way to give his character motivation, to show the audience that MJF, who also should never be a babyface, and they've broken both of those rules that I would have held firm on already. And it would show that MJF, despite all of his manipulations and maneuverings and sleazeball tactics, and it always seems like no one can ever get the better of this guy, that ultimately he is a tortured soul who can never and will never achieve his ultimate goal of being world champion. And that would be where the fans always have the one-up on MJF. Despite all of his maneuverings and his backstabbings and his screwing people over and ruining people's lives and costing people championships and all of these other things, what should have constantly eluded MJF for his entire career would be he himself getting his hands on that world title. It was the perfect story to tell with him. And, they can't tell that story anymore. And I think the perfect story here is that Hangman and Swerve hate each other forever. I don't want them to reach an understanding, whether it's an uneasy understanding, whether it's a mutually beneficial understanding of one another, whether it's being frenemies. Remember that phrase? Remember that term, frenemies? That was very popular about a half decade ago in pop culture. I haven't heard anybody throw out a good frenemies in a long time. I'm using it today. Frenemies. Maybe that'll be the title of this show. But I don't want any of that. I want these two guys to hate each other's guts forever. I want them to be lifelong and career-long rivals in this company. That's more interesting to me than having them come together at some point. If you have them come together in a creative way, in a way that piques people's interest, can you draw money off of it? Of course you can. And at the end of the day in pro wrestling, the move that draws money is ultimately always the right move, right? We can never lose sight of that. To me, you don't have to analyze pro wrestling that way. You absolutely do not have to analyze pro wrestling that way. Around these parts, that's how we analyze pro wrestling. I don't think you can divorce the two. Because creative decisions in pro wrestling, whether you like it or not, are almost always, in 99% of cases, made with the idea of what is going to help us draw more money. So how can I come on this show? How can I do this for almost 15 years now and not analyze the moves that these bookers and these promotions make? How can I analyze this stuff not from that perspective? I have to. I have to. And even though I think Swerve and Hangman being enemies for life, and again, they drift apart. They'll have their yearly match when they cross paths, which is appeared to be what's happening now. But you always keep that flame burning. You always keep it smoldering. And at any moment, these two, whether it be in an Owen Hart tournament or maybe in a Continental Classic, or maybe just because they bump shoulders in the hallway, there's always the possibility that that smolder, that flame, can turn back into an inferno. That's what I would prefer from a narrative standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint. Is that the best way to approach their relationship from the standpoint of drawing money? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Hangman and Swerve coming together, or teasing that they're going to come together and drawing that out for as long as you can, is the path to drawing more money. I don't know the answer to that. I don't have a great feel for that right now. But it will ruin a great story. It will ruin a great narrative. Because in pro wrestling, there are few and far between instances of true career rivals that never buried the hatchet even for a second. Think about it. You can come up with a couple, but oftentimes it's too hard to resist trying something new, trying something different, bringing the rivals together and seeing how the fans react to that. And again, drawing money off of it. I hope that we don't see that happen, because I think it would be the second great long-term through line for AEW and the macro view of the company that they will have tossed away. MJF should have never, ever, ever been world champion. So we'll see. So how do you maybe just tease this for a long time? Sam and Diane. That used to be, and still probably is, although I haven't had my finger on the pulse of American television sitcoms for a long time. But the staple used to be the will they or won't they? Are these two ever going to fuck? Will Sam and Diane ever get back together? A more contemporary example would be The Office with Pam and Jim. And then, you have Who's the Boss with Tony and can't remember Judith Light's character's name on Who's the Boss. What are you doing, Joe? This is your wheelhouse. Angela, of course. Tony Maselli and Angela Bauer, were they ever going to fuck? I always had a thing for Alyssa Milano. We're around the same age. She's a little older than me. So at every stage of her life, I was about her age, and she was like the slightly older woman, whether she was 12, 18, 20, or 35, right? Love some Who's the Boss. Ah, that Hellcat Mona. What a character. But yeah, a staple of American television sitcoms was, very much always the sexual tension, right? Are they gonna fuck? And I couldn't help think about that when Swerve dropped the "I know" on Hangman Page. I was wondering, are they gonna passionately kiss in this moment? Are they gonna fuck, so to speak? And Hangman was confused by his emotions and storms off. it bordered on being a little too melodramy, a little too cinematic for my taste. It bordered on that. But it's obviously what everybody's talking about coming out of the show. Okay? So they're planting some kind of seed here, is what they're doing. To me, it's a mistake. Maybe you tease it, but then don't give it to the people and have them have another match against each other. Maybe then you plant more seeds when they do have their matches against each other, and you tease the audience until they can't take it anymore, and you time it just right before you bring these guys together. You have the perfect story set up, the perfect mutual enemy, the perfect shared directive before you actually do it. And then when you do team them up, you tease that they can't get along, that the history is too thick, that it is too much, that it can't work. So I'm not saying it can't be interesting to go in this direction. I'm just saying I think I prefer the other direction. The fuck this guy forever. I'll not only burn down his house, I'll set him on fire direction.